Background music, deep war drums, faint sirens, and radio chatter. Narrator, intense tone. December 11th, 1941, the day that sealed the fate of the world's most feared dictator. On that cold morning in Berlin, Adolf Hitler made a decision that would destroy everything he had built. He declared war on the United States of America. Sound, crowd cheering, echo of Hitler's voice shouting, "Deutschland!" Only 4 days had passed since Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. The world was burning, and Hitler believed destiny was on his side. But history would soon prove that was the moment he signed his own death warrant. Hitler's dream of world domination. Music, marching drums fade in. Since 1939, Hitler's armies had conquered almost all of Europe. Poland had fallen. France was crushed in just 6 weeks. From Norway in the north to Greece in the south, Nazi banners waved proudly. Hitler dreamed of creating a 1,000-year Reich. He believed he was chosen by fate to rule the world. But deep inside, he knew that only one major power stood in his way: the United States. America had not yet entered the war, but its factories were producing tanks, ships, and planes for Britain and the Soviet Union. Hitler saw this as a direct challenge, a sleeping giant preparing for war. America Before the Storm. Sound radio broadcast from 1940s America. In 1941, America was still recovering from the Great Depression. Most Americans didn't want another foreign war. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had promised to keep America neutral. But he also knew Nazi Germany was a threat to global freedom. Through the Lend-Lease Act, Roosevelt began sending weapons and supplies to Britain and the Soviet Union. This secretly angered Hitler, who saw Roosevelt as a traitor to neutrality. Still, both nations avoided direct conflict until Japan struck Pearl Harbor. Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. Sound, air raid sirens, explosions, chaos. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese Imperial Navy launched a surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. In just 2 hours, more than 2,400 Americans were killed. Battleships burned, planes exploded, and the Pacific was filled with smoke. The next day, America declared war, not on Germany, but on Japan. The U.S. was officially at war in the Pacific, not in Europe. Hitler was not obligated to join Japan's war, yet he chose to. Hitler's furious reaction. Sound, echoing voices in Reich Chancellery. When Hitler heard of Japan's victory, he was thrilled. He saw it as a sign that the Axis powers were destined to rule the world. "Japan has awakened the Americans," he said. "Now we must strike before they strike us." His generals warned him. "My Führer, America is too powerful. They have vast resources." But Hitler ignored every warning. He believed the United States was weak, controlled by what he called Jewish influence. His hatred blinded him and led him straight into disaster. The fatal decision, declaring war. Music, Reichstag ambience, Hitler's voice echoing. On December 11th, 1941, Hitler walked into the Reichstag building. In front of cheering Nazi officials, he shouted, "The United States has declared itself against Germany. Therefore, we now consider ourselves at war with America." The hall erupted in applause. Hitler smiled, convinced he was writing history. He believed Japan would attack America's west coast, while Germany would crush Britain, leaving the world divided between Berlin and Tokyo. But what he didn't realize was he had just united the most powerful nations on earth against him. America awakens. Sound, factory sirens, hammers, engines roaring. Roosevelt's speech to Congress echoed across America. "We will win through absolute victory." Overnight, the U.S. transformed into a war machine. Men enlisted, women worked in factories, and industries produced tanks, planes, and ships at lightning speed. In 1942 alone, America built more warplanes than Germany could produce in the entire war. The sleeping giant had awakened, and Hitler's nightmare had begun. Turning of the tide. Music, rising tension, sound of aircraft and machine guns. Within a year, American forces began striking back. In North Africa, U.S. troops fought alongside the British against Rommel's Afrika Korps. In the Atlantic, American warships hunted German U-boats that once ruled the seas. Hitler was furious. He demanded total war. But even his own people began to see the cracks in the Nazi empire. Hitler's miscalculation. Hitler's biggest mistake wasn't declaring war. It was underestimating the enemy. He believed America was soft, that democracy made them weak. But American unity proved stronger than Nazi ideology. While Germany struggled, on two fronts, against the Soviets in the East and the Allies in the West. American factories flooded Europe with endless supplies. Hitler could no longer replace his losses. The tide of war had turned, permanently. Collapse of the Nazi Empire. Music, dark and heavy tone. By 1944, the Allies invaded Normandy. D-Day had begun. American, British, and Canadian troops stormed the beaches, pushing the Germans back toward Berlin. In the east, the Soviet army crushed Hitler's forces city after city. German soldiers surrendered in the thousands. The dream of a 1,000-year Reich ended in just 12 years. The end of the Führer. Sound, distant explosions, Berlin under siege. April 1945, the Red Army surrounded Berlin. Inside his bunker, Hitler ranted, blamed his generals, and refused to surrender. On April 30, 1945, as Soviet shells exploded above, Adolf Hitler took his own life. The man who wanted to rule the world died in a dark basement surrounded by ruin. His empire collapsed, his fate sealed by his own arrogance. After the Führer's fall, sound, solemn music, footsteps over rubble. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day. The Nazi banners were torn down. Berlin lay in ruins. Millions of German civilians wandered aimlessly, hungry and broken. What had begun with promises of glory ended in total destruction. Hitler's empire had crumbled, his generals were captured, and his ideology rejected by history itself. In the ashes of Berlin, Allied soldiers found Hitler's bunker, the last symbol of his madness. The dictator who once terrified nations was now gone. The mind of a madman, soft, eerie background, ticking clock sound. Psychologists who studied Hitler's behavior described him as paranoid, narcissistic and delusional. In his final months, he trusted no one, not even his generals. He believed betrayal surrounded him. Hitler's health had also collapsed. His hands trembled, his speech slurred, and his body was weakened by years of drug abuse and stress. He ranted for hours about miracle weapons that would save Germany. But deep down, he knew the end was near. The man who declared war on America, believing himself invincible, had become a shadow, living in fear of his own soldiers. The rise of the U.S. war machine. Sound, engines, factories, patriotic American music. Across the Atlantic, the United States emerged as the new superpower. Within just 4 years, America had built more than 300,000 aircraft, 88,000 tanks, and 8,000 warships. The U.S. economy had transformed into a production powerhouse, unstoppable and united. Roosevelt's leadership, followed by President Truman, had turned democracy into a weapon of survival. The war that Hitler started to dominate Europe had now created the most powerful military force in human history. Hitler's declaration of war had not destroyed America. It had forged it. The turning points Hitler never saw. Music, strategic, reflective tone. Historians still debate why Hitler declared war on the U.S. Some say it was loyalty to Japan. Others believe it was his ego, his obsession with global domination. But one truth remains. The moment Germany attacked America's allies, the war turned irreversible. The United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union formed an alliance unlike any in history. Together they squeezed Germany from all sides, economically, militarily, and psychologically. The dream of world conquest vanished beneath Allied bombs and tanks. The fire over Germany. Sound, air raid sirens, bombers overhead. From 1943 onwards, Allied bombers pounded German cities night after night. Hamburg, Dresden, Berlin, entire cities turned to firestorms. The Luftwaffe, once feared across Europe, was shattered. German soldiers fought bravely, but the numbers were against them. Hitler's decision to fight both East and West left no escape. While the Soviets crushed his forces in Stalingrad, American and British troops advanced from Normandy to the Rhine. It was total war and total collapse. The reckoning. Music, dark tone, slow build. After Hitler's death, the Allies held the Nuremberg trials. The world saw for the first time the crimes of the Nazi regime laid bare. Mass murder, genocide, torture. The men who once obeyed Hitler's every command now faced justice. Some were hanged, others imprisoned for life. Hitler's dream of a glorious Reich had ended, replaced by shame, guilt, and the eternal memory of horror. Germany was divided, East and West, a scar that would last for nearly half a century. The legacy of a fatal decision. Soft orchestral background, somber mood. When Hitler declared war on the United States, he believed he was shaping destiny. But he had misread the world, misunderstood power, and underestimated human will. His declaration united his enemies, destroyed his empire, and transformed the 20th century forever. From that day forward, the United States rose as a global power, and Hitler's Germany sank into the darkest chapter of history. His name became a symbol, not of strength, but of ultimate failure. The man who wanted to rule the world ended by declaring war on it. Screen fades to black. Text appears. When Hitler sealed his fate, the day he declared war on the USA, because sometimes one decision can destroy everything. When Hitler sealed his fate, the day he declared war on the USA, extended finale, the world after Hitler, music, soft orchestral tone, sound of rebuilding cities. 1945. The war had ended, but the scars remained. Across Europe, cities lay in ruins. Millions were dead. From London to Leningrad, from Berlin to Warsaw, the world was rebuilding itself from ashes. For the first time in history, humanity had witnessed destruction on a scale beyond imagination. Nuclear bombs had fallen on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hitler's war had changed not just borders, but the very idea of civilization. And amid the wreckage, a new world order was rising. America rises as a superpower. Sound engines roaring patriotic music. When Hitler declared war on the U.S., he thought it would break America. Instead, it forged a nation stronger than ever before. The American flag now flew across Europe and the Pacific. U.S. industries ruled global trade. Its scientists led the atomic age, and its soldiers were hailed as liberators. In 1945, America stood tall, the symbol of freedom, democracy, and power. Hitler's mistake had done what no plan ever could. It made the United States the most powerful country in the world, the shadow of the Soviet Union. Music, dark suspense tone, sound of wind in ruins. But victory brought a new rival. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, emerged as another giant. Powerful, ambitious, and determined to spread communism across the world. The friendship forged during the war turned into tension. East versus West. Capitalism versus communism. Hitler's fall had given birth to a new conflict, not fought with bullets, but with fear, spies, and ideology. The Cold War had begun. The Cold War begins. Sound, ticking clocks, typewriters, distant radio chatter. Between 1947 and 1991, the world lived under the shadow of nuclear war. America and the Soviet Union built thousands of atomic weapons. Both sides raced to the moon, armed nations, and fought proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. The same world that Hitler had divided with hate was now divided by power. Every leader knew one wrong move could end civilization forever. Hitler's war had not just ended with his death, it had rewritten human history. Germany divided. Sound, barbed wire tension, wall construction noises. Post-war Germany was split into two worlds. The Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, became democratic, prosperous, and allied with America. The German Democratic Republic, East Germany, fell under Soviet control, closed, censored, and oppressed. Berlin itself was divided by a wall, a cold, concrete scar running through the heart of Europe. For nearly half a century, Germany lived in two realities, one free, one imprisoned, all because of a dictator's decision in 1941. The world that Hitler wanted to conquer now stood as a lesson to all. Mankind, lessons from the fall. Soft piano music. Hitler's declaration of war on the United States was not just a military mistake. It was the ultimate act of arrogance. He believed fear could control the world. He believed hatred could build an empire. But the truth of history proved otherwise. No matter how powerful an empire may seem, when it's built on hate, it always destroys itself. The fall of Nazi Germany became the greatest warning in modern history. That pride, unchecked, leads only to ruin. Background, orchestral crescendo, then soft fade. Narrator, calm, reflective tone. In the end, Hitler's declaration of war on the United States was not just a political decision. It was a fatal prophecy. It marked the beginning of his end, the collapse of his empire, and the rise of a new world he never imagined. From the ashes of war came two superpowers. From destruction came progress, and from tyranny came a renewed belief in freedom. Music slows down. Voice fades. The story of Adolf Hitler is not just about one man's downfall. It is about the price of pride, the danger of hate, and the power of unity against darkness. Screen fades to black. Text on screen. When Hitler sealed his fate, the day he declared war on the USA, a story of madness, power, and the birth of a new world order.